during that time, and we stayed, me and my wife, we stayed in the US for 6 months. And it was during that time the Lord spoke to me and my wife and said, you can't leave here. I want you back in Uganda, and I want you to go to that village where you lost part of your family and plant a church there for me. And so I think that was one of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to make in my life, was to go back to the place of my past. My shame and my pain was really, really hard to make the decision, but I had grown in the Lord, and I knew when God spoke that you needed to respond in obedience. People confuse forgiveness and reconciliation. I think forgiveness is different, reconciliation is different. You don't have to reconcile with someone you are forgiving. It can come later, but you can forgive.
Welcome to Pastor.Robert podcast. Today is another blessed day, another opportunity that we have to again hear another story and see how God is so great. Wherever you are, you're Christian, you're not, your father, your child, your grandpa, wherever you are and whoever you are, this time is going to be a blessing. I want to encourage you again to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and call your family to watch this with you. Today, I'm with a guest, a father, a pastor, a husband, a man that I've always looked up to, and I've had a chance to sit with him, to walk with him, to go places with him, especially in the recent days, and my life does not remain the same. So let's welcome Pastor Robert Kasozi at Pastor.Robert podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Pastor Joseph. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for making time to be with me. I'll ask you to start by telling people a little bit more about who you are and your upbringing.
Well, I want to welcome each one of you to the JoJo podcast. As you heard, my name is Pastor Kasozi Robert, based here in Uganda, East Africa, and married to Robina Kasozi. Been married for 28 years. We'll be 29 this coming October. And we have 2 kids, a beautiful daughter, Annie Joy Kasozi, and we have Samuel David Kasozi. Annie is 25, and Samuel David is 19. And we live here in Uganda, and we serve here in the East African nation of Uganda. Yeah, we are currently pastors at a church called Kawempe Worship Center, but we are also leading an organization, a fellowship of churches called Uganda Christian Outreach Ministries, commonly known as Yesu Akwagala in Uganda. It's a great organization, planting churches. We have about 365 churches in Uganda alone, but we have a presence in 8 other African countries. Then we have about 19 schools in Uganda, primary schools and 2 high schools, and we have a Bible college. We run medical centers, so it's a great operation we do in Uganda. But I was so glad to be here on your podcast.
Thank you for being here. Now, going back to your beginning, the beginning of everything, can you please tell us a little bit, when you were a kid, did you ever dream to become a pastor? What was your passion? What was your dream? And how did you end up becoming a pastor in the church?
Well, I was, to be precise, I was born in 1971. And my family, my mother and father were nominal Christians. They were Christians by name. So they never went to church. I don't remember my parents going to church. So that's the kind of religious background we had. We were religious by name. And so I don't remember anything to do with church in the early years of my life, except my grandmother, my mother's mother. She was what you call Anglican. I think Church of Uganda, we call them in Uganda. And she would go to church. That's the first person. She bought me a Bible. I must have been around 7 or 8, around there. She bought me a Bible as a gift, and she told me she wanted me to be a reverend in the Church of Uganda. And I didn't know what that meant at that time. But she's the first person, I think, to make me look into what it means to serve God. But I wasn't a Christian myself. and my parents were nominal Christians. So I don't have any background or ministry or church. So it took me a long time to come to discover what Christianity is and what ministry means.
Now, when did you realize that you need Christ in your life? At what age, and what was that event or circumstance what was like?
Yeah, for me, it was after a long time of suffering. When I was a kid, most people who are my age and older who hear, who know the stories of Uganda and who remember the name Idi Amin. He was a famous dictator in Uganda who ruled Uganda in 1971, the very year I was born, to 1979. And so between there was a lot of wars in Uganda. But after he was kicked out of power, I mean, the next 5-6 years were very brutal for the whole nation. And that's when I was turning 11 years. And I went through a very severe civil war in Uganda. I had left the city with my parents stayed in the city, but I was sent to go to live with my grandparents in a village called Masurita. And me and my brother and my sister, we've been there for just a little bit over 4 months, 5 months, and the civil war broke out. It was between the government and a group of rebels who thought the government was not fair enough to the people. So they picked up arms to fight the government, and they came to the village where I had moved with my brother and sister, living with my grandparents. And so the suffering we saw during the Civil War, my sister was killed, my grandfather was killed. I lost a lot of people in my family. But somehow I survived. And after survived, stayed in the war. We called it the war zone. We stayed in that war zone for 3 years. But it's a long story, and it's a miracle that I'm here and alive. But I came out, and by the time I came out, I must have been around 15 going to 16. And that's when my journey of searching for true meaning of life and purpose began. I wanted to know why I survived, who preserved my life during the war, because I saw a lot of people die. He said that those 5 years of a civil war in Uganda, about 500,000 people were killed in that part of Uganda. But I was among the few that survived. And so when I came out, even as a young boy, I had this question: why did I survive? I wanted to find out my purpose. So back in Kampala, where my parents had lived, they never experienced the war. But I came back to them, and they put me back to school. And that's where I met a friend who introduced me to the Lord, to Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, witnessed to me. And the moment the gospel was shared to me, it made sense to me, because I knew there was a power somewhere that kept me alive. And I knew there was someone who had the purpose for me to survive. So the day I heard the gospel is the day I gave my life to the Lord. And so that's how I ended up in a church. Yep.
Now, after receiving Christ, every young person, actually, let me first say, I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your sister at a young age and your grandma who was taking care of you. But we know that every young person starts dreaming about becoming something, especially when we're in high school, because we're thinking about university that leads us to career. So what did you want to become after high school, career-wise?
Yeah, my father, when I was a kid, my father was an accountant for some government department, I don't remember. He was a civil servant, we call them in Uganda. And he was always smartly dressed, went to work every morning, came back home every evening. And as a kid, I think that's the only father figure was my father. And I admired the way he dressed and what he did. And so I wanted to follow in his footsteps and become an accountant at an early age.
And now, from the accountant to a pastor.
Yeah.
What happened in between?
In between, when I came to the Lord, and my family was not happy when I told them now I am born again. We call them born again in Uganda. And I was saved. And my family was not happy. So for some reason we had to part ways for a few years. I left home and I stayed at the church. My pastors allowed me to have a space at the church where I stayed for a few years. And it was during that time that my walk with God became serious. I read my Bible. I learned how to pray and fast. I learned how to hear the voice of God. And it took God himself to speak to me. Some people don't believe that God speaks, but I had the voice of God. And it's there that I made the decision that I knew he wanted me to preach the gospel and to be in ministry. So it was there. After I got born again, I was in school. I went ahead to finish my junior high, or we call it senior 4 in Uganda. And then I went to high school. And it was after high school that I was very, very sure now that I needed to serve the Lord. And so I went to the Bible college to train to become a minister.
Was that all in Uganda, in
Yes.
the Bible college?
Yes, that was, we had, I think at that time Uganda had 1 or 2 Bible colleges. And the one I went to was headed by brothers and sisters from South Korea. It was called Reformed Theological Bible College in a place called Bunamwaya. It was close to the church where I was going. And so I went for 3 years, did my associate in theology.
So after leaving all those tough times, the season of the war, the high school, living away from your family because you have become a Christian, now you're training to be a pastor. I don't know what it was like that time for pastors in those years, because I still know in many African countries, many pastors still struggle with working in the church with no payment, where the church can't afford to pay them on a daily basis, but they are expected to be there for the church every day. What was it like in those years? Was it considered to be a career, a job where you can live and survive and take care of your family?
No, ministry, especially pastoral work, was not a job, was a service. The ministry, you don't serve. It wasn't an employment, at least as far as I remember. And I had looked at my pastors, Pastor Mayanja, Pastor Stephen Damulia Mayanja, Pastor Kawesa, and Pastor the late Papa Ron. He was a missionary, him and his wife, Mama Shuli. They became missionaries from Washington State to Uganda for many years. So when I left my father's house to stay at the church, I met that missionary couple, Papa Ron and Mama Shuli. And I was challenged by the way they lived, the way they spent their life. They had left the US, the most prosperous nation. They had left their jobs to come and just serve in this African nation. And I think that's a couple that really inspired me. But also my local pastors, Pastor Steve Mayanja and Pastor Kawesa, were the same. They were never church employees. They were just serving a calling on their lives. Ministry for them was ministry. I don't remember, because I came close to the church and the church administration, and I knew they were not earning a salary or anything. They had to find other means to sustain their families. So pastoral work even then was never a job or an employment. It was a service to the community. Yeah.
That sounds like it was also hard, especially if one had to have a family. Was there an option of a pastor working in the secular offices full-time, Monday to Friday morning, and come for ministry evening, or pastors were supposed to be there full-time at that time? If they were supposed to be outside, how did you manage to balance it? And if not, how would one pastor take care of their families if they are serving the Lord full-time with no income, with no payment?
For Papa Ron and Mama Shuli, the missionary couple, they were fully here, so they depended on the family support back from the US. And in those days, I don't know about now. In those days, churches that would send missionaries, they would back them up financially. They would support them a little bit. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them on the mission field. So for Papa Ron and Mama Shuli, that's how they lived. They had a little bit of support from back home, from church and family. For Pastor Kawesa, I don't remember how he survived, but all I remember that his wife was working some job in the city, and Pastor Steve also. Basically, what happened in those days? Pastors lived on. I heard them say we lived on miracles. Kind people will see how much the pastor's done, and they'll come and say, "Hey, I paid your taxes," or "I brought you food, I bought you a shirt or a shoe," and many of the pastors survived on handouts. And I remember those days. It was believed that if God called you to be in the full-time ministry, if you tried to look for a job, it would be a sin. So it took a long time. It's different now, but back then, if you were a pastor, you were supposed to be full-time at church, and neighborhood, we call it a secular job, a marketplace job. And it was difficult, because I remember talking to their children. It was really hard. It was really hard to fend and feed the pastor's family. So pastors will come up with private businesses. Pastor Steve Mayanja started farming on the side, but he had some land. He would grow food. And Pastor Kawes, I think most of their income came from the wife working and well-wishers, people that willing to support them financially. Yep.
I know that in your life, going through all those, you had an opportunity to move to the US.
Yes.
The country that was the most powerful country economically with more opportunities, and you moved there, but later you came back to Uganda. So what was that opportunity like, and what brought you back to Uganda in that season, since you had an opportunity to go and you can still serve the Lord there, but also in a better condition where you don't have to worry about your family, your future, and all other plans?
Yeah, so when I moved at the church and I met Papa Ron and Mama Shuli, the missionaries, they kind of become like parents to me. We call them spiritual parents. And somehow I was able to open up and tell them my story, how I survived during the war. And I've written a book about it on Amazon, but it's a very sad story. But when I told Papa Ron, it was like, wow, I want our people, the Americans, to hear your story. And so it's Papa Ron and Mama Shuli brought me over to the US after my wedding to my wife, 1997, October. So we flew with them to the US, and we had no idea if we were going to stay there or come back to Uganda. But we landed there, and I wanted to stay. And so I was looking into going back to school and permanently settle in the US. It was easier then if I wanted to stay. But it was during that time, me and my wife, we stayed in the US for 6 months. And it was during that time the Lord spoke to me and my wife and said, "You can't live here. I want you back in Uganda, and I want you to go to that village where you lost part of your family and plant a church there for me." And so I think that was one of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to make in my life, was to go back to the place of my past. My shame, my pain was really, really hard to make the decision. But I had grown in the Lord, and I knew when God spoke that you needed to respond in obedience. So the desire to settle in the US, get a job, raise a family there, was, I decided to obey the Lord, and instead of staying in the US. So it was hard, but I had to make the decision. And my wife agreed that we needed to obey the Lord. I'm glad she did. It was difficult then, but looking back now, I say, I'm glad we did.
Yeah. Because it's still difficult up to today. Because many people from different countries all over the world, they want to go to North America. They say for greener pastures. But hearing that you had to leave that in those years, I can't imagine how hard it was. And praise the Lord that you had to listen. So when you look back in those years, is there a few things that you look at and say, if we didn't listen, we couldn't have gotten here?
Yeah, because we flew back here early 1998 April, and we straight away started going to that village, Masulita, to plant a church. And funny enough, when we went there, most of the people that came to the church we planted had the same story like mine. They had gone through the war, they had lost family, they had suffered the same thing that I had suffered. But the Lord had brought me out, healed me, and now He's taking me back to be part of the healing for my people. So, yeah, it was really hard in the beginning. But then when the church opened up, the people started coming. We got a lot of younger people. And so over the years, discipling them and mentoring them, a lot of those young people, we stayed in that village for 15 years. And by the time we left, we had planted 15, I think about 15, 16 churches.
Wow.
And the pastors, all the young pastors and their wives were just young people we met when we planted the church. We discipled them and we mentored them, and now they're big leaders in our nation, and they are pastors all over. So if we had stayed in the US or refused to go to that village, that would be a lifetime miss. Because now I look back at the several churches that have been planted, the schools that have been built, the individuals, the lives that has been impacted by that small village. But a great ministry grew that brought revival not only to the people who came to the church, but it was a community transformation in the village of Masulita. You can go there and you can ask for stories, and you'll be amazed that the village, the community transformation for that entire community started when that church began. And we saw the Lord changing lives, but also total community transformation. So that one of the things I look back and say, I'm so glad I had the ability to say yes to what God said.
Yeah, I remember many times Pastor Steve used you as an example in many teachings in the Bible college when I was there, and a few conferences that I've attended. He would give an example of obedience, and he would use you. So he used to say that there is a young man who accepted the calling of God, went to the village of Masulita. Then he will start mentioning the things that the Lord has used you to do in that community. And that encouraged me and many young people who were there. And that was before I met you in person. Then later I started seeing you preaching, and recently I've had a chance to minister with you. I can't tell you how much that means to me. Even sitting here, it really feels like a huge privilege that I can't take for granted. And now I also, part of my class, I had some people from Masulita who were in Bible college. And I would see them and be like, oh, this is a product of that young man they told us who obeyed God. That was a living proof of what God can do. But I also know that after all those years in Masulita, the time came and there had to be a transition. The ministry, Uganda Christian Outreach Ministries that you mentioned, that you're now the leader of, lost a former president. And you had to transition and take over the leadership a little bit before he passed away, but also take over the church that he used to lead before. How did it feel like to be a leader of a big organization and to feel in the shoes of someone you've looked up to and someone who was your leader?
Well, I can say you are never ready. Even when you are ready, you are never ready. It doesn't feel like you are ready. So I remember Pastor Stephen Kawesa coming to me and say, hey, I'm retiring. He's been in ministry for about 40 years. So he wanted to retire from pastoral work. And so that was my first transition. So I'm moving away from Masulita, where we had pastored for 15 years. So we're coming to Kawempe. And I've been in Kawempe for a year or so, and he comes to me and say, hey, we want you to lead the organization. And I bluntly said, no. I am still taking over the new church. I'm getting used to the environment and the people. I can't do a transition to take over an organization. I bluntly said no. And I remember him, he said, well, the Lord has chosen you, and he will make it happen. So for about a year or so, I knew they wanted me to lead the organization, but I didn't feel ready. I felt like the organization was too big for me, and besides, the transition for the church was ongoing. It's not. I'll say for pastors, it is easier to plant a new church than try to take on an existing church. It's, at least from my experience, I'd rather go to an empty village and church community and plant a new church than try to take on a church that has been in existence and another leadership. It takes too much long to do the transition to make the church face buy into the vision that you have. But anyway, it was so the transition for the church is still ongoing, and then they want me to lead the organization. So I said no. But about a year later, him and two other missionaries died in a car crash, very terrible accident. No one was prepared for it. No one saw it coming. But we lost 3 great leaders of the entire ministry, and I think when I say if there ever been a hard time for the entire ministry, that was the day when we woke up and they told us Pastor Kawesa has died in an accident with Pastor Eddie Polai and Pastor Scott Vos, 3 of them. And I remember the day, driving from Kawempe that Monday morning, was the Easter Monday, and driving to Segukoans, looking at their dead bodies, and they are gone. And so I'm trying to mourn my leaders. And my friend, he was from Alaska, Pastor Dale Canally. He had come to visit me, and he was doing a marriage seminar that morning when the news came that the 3 had died. And so I'm trying to mourn. I'm going through the emotions of mourning, and he taps on my shoulder and he said, hey, you can't behave like a regular person. You are the leader now. And I'm like, yeah, I am the leader, because they are dead and I'm still here. And so he told me, you need to offer the election. You need to get up and tell the people what's next. And for me, that was abrupt. But the moment he told me that, it dawned on me that I am the leader, and I needed to stand up and give the election, because no one knew what to do next. So in a few minutes, I had to stand up and lead the team. Hey, we need to tell the families of the missionaries. We need to work on the arrangements of the burial. We needed to return the 2 bodies, the bodies back to the U.S. We need to call the embassy. God gives grace when you need to use it. And so I remember giving the election even without reading through a book or without consulting anyone. I look back and say, I think the Spirit of the Lord was upon me at that moment. And as the day went on and the days went on, I realized I am the leader. There is no one. If I step down and say I won't lead, there were other people who could have done it, but I had worked so close to these leaders for years. They had mentored me, they had discipled me, they had exposed me, they had taken me. By that time, I've been to the US several times, conferences, to organizations, and so I knew how organization leadership worked. So it was abrupt. I can't say emotionally I was ready, but God knew I was. And it's now in the past, and the organization, now that's passing from first generation to my generation, which is the second generation. And I'm telling you, everyone thought we would cross shop, but instead we have doubled. We've grown more, and we've taken more territory in the ministry. So I look back and say it was God. Yeah.
That was a very sad and shocking moment,
Very.
not only in Uganda, but
Yeah.
all over the world where the ministry is connected.
Yeah.
I remember we were in Rwanda and the news came and nobody knew what to say. But
Yeah.
I'm glad the Lord used that moment to raise you. Did you know that your like, your comment, or your share of this video helps YouTube algorithm recommend more of our content to so many people? And then in that case, we're able to reach out to so many people. And these testimonies are able to touch and encourage so many people. That's a great support that I would like to ask you to give to us. Support us so we can reach to so many other people. And if you're going through hardship, I would like to remind you that Jesus promised that those who are tired, those who are weary, those who do not know what to do, those who are crushed and confused, those who see no hope ahead of them, He's willing to give them rest, a new beginning, and life that is found in Him alone. And His rest and His life, they're not for a short while, but they are eternal, unending. Nobody can take them away. No situation can take them away. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but His rest is there forever. Now, going to another question is, I've had a moment to observe your leadership style. You are that kind of a leader who delegates to the people and give them opportunity to use their talent, their gift, and you allow people to make mistakes as a way to teach them, and you give that platform. And that has really been one thing that encourages many young people. Like you said, the first generation took leadership, did great things. And now when it came to your generation, which is the second generation, also you're doing your part. But tomorrow there will be another generation. I would not be scared to say that not every leader is good at delegating and giving opportunities, since there are so many leaders who are in your generation who do things better than my generation, but you still choose to give those opportunities. When did you, I don't know if I should ask, learn or start to do that style of leadership? And what are the challenges that come with it?
I think it's something that my spiritual father, Papa Ron, used to say. He say, for every leader, the day you take on the role of leadership, you need immediately to start to work yourself out of the job. He would say that over and over again, meaning that the day you start leading, you need to look behind you and say, if I leave now, who's going to replace me? If you are to leave behind the legacy. And so that, I think for me, in my mentorship line with my pastors and my leaders, that was big. That was big. Preparing the next generation. It doesn't matter how old you are. You always have to look behind you and say, hey, is there anyone following me? Do they know what I know? Can they do what I do? If I was to step away from what I'm doing, will what I've started continue without me? And so that has always been at the back of my mind in everything I do, especially for the leadership, for leadership. And so even when I left the first church that we planted, me and my wife, over the years we raised men and women, and of course many of them left the church to go and plant other churches, but we kept about 5 couples that, and we always knew one of these, if we step away, one of these will become the pastor, because we didn't know how long we would be there. And so it's something that it's been in my system. Everywhere I step up as a leader, my leadership style is simple. I create an environment for other leaders to lead, because knowing I can do a lot of things, but I feel like empowering other people to lead is, for me, is part of my calling. And it has a lot of challenges, because you are trusting people who have never been tested anyway. So among, if you trust about 10 people, maybe 6 will let you down or 8 will let you down, and you got to be prepared for stuff like that. Because I've had people that look like they qualify for leadership, and they are talented, they are gifted, they are anointed, and you put a lot of energy in them and time and resources, and just walk away, and they never appreciate or look back. So you got to be ready for setbacks like that. But you've got to be a focused leader if you're going to raise other leaders. Because among 5, you may get 1. But that 1 should be your focus and your testimony. You should pour out everything you have in that 1 that I decided to work with you. So for me, that's how my mind works. I'm always looking for leadership. And so for me, delegation is very simple. I don't delegate because I'm absent. I delegate and I sit there and I watch, not to make for them to make mistakes, but so I can encourage. And the sports, I think it's a gift for me. I believe it's a gift for me to be able to support leadership in others. And so even where I am now at the organizational level, I have a few couples that I'm mentoring and discipling, and I know if I was to say I'm retiring now or stepping away, if anything was to happen, I know this organization won't go down with me because we are humans. Pastor Kawesa and the 2 missionaries, we didn't know we would lose them. I mean, both the missionaries, Eddie was about 48 and Scott was about 46 and Pastor Kawesa was about 56. I mean, I consider that young, especially leading an organization. So I consider that young, but they left in a way that no one approved or no one wanted, but they left. So as leaders, you got to prepare as if there is no tomorrow, and know that in your absence, wherever you're going, wherever you started, someone who comes next you will be able to take it to another level, and you've got to have the security in you. I feel like in our generation there is a lot of insecurity in a lot of leaders who, especially those, I don't know about Canada or the US, but I feel like in Africa there is a lot of insecurities for leaders. They start these ministries or churches or corporations or businesses, and they feel like they are the vision, and without them, nothing can happen. If you have that kind of mindset, whatever you do will never go from first generation to the next. And for me, I believe God is a God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's a God of generations. And part of my responsibility, prepare the next generation so that what I can't do, they'll be able to do bigger and better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have one question about discipleship, but I'll ask it later. Let me first mention that I had a privilege to talk to your daughter, and now I have confidence to ask you the next question. This is outside ministry. I know many pastors, it's a big challenge to deal with making sure you're a father at home and you're a pastor at church and not combining them or misusing them. I had a chance to talk to your daughter, and she told me that she has never ever felt like you're not her dad. She told me the only thing she sees, the 2 personalities she sees in you, is dad at home and dad at church, you. And she said that has helped her to grow and seek God, and you've given her a chance to always do it by herself, try it. But that makes me wonder, is there 2 examples that you can share of mistakes you've ever made as a husband or a father, and you sit down and you look at it today and you say, I don't know what I was thinking about?
I have a lot of mistakes. I'm trying to choose the best tool. As a husband, I think, at some point, I was so sold out to ministry for my wife. I mean, we both worked together in the church for all those years. But I look back and say, I think we devoted too much time in the church. And I think at some point we got to a place where we couldn't separate our home and marriage away from the church. And I think that was a mistake because we lived by the church. So the church was like a 1 minute walk from our house. And we had a lot of people over any time of the day. And In the villages, people just walk over your door and knock. Oh, we need to talk to the pastor. Doesn't matter the time. And so in the beginning, I think that was it had no boundaries. That was one of the big mistakes I made. That not to separate the church from my home. But then as a father, man, I'm trying to think so hard. As a father, I think for it's not spiritual, but now that I look at it, I think I should have done it differently. When we had Annie, and me and my wife, we agreed that we should not have another kid. We were scared, number one, because of resources. We didn't have enough money. We had a young church, yeah, the church that couldn't pay us. So when we had Annie, we said, we can't have another baby immediately. We need to wait. And we waited too long. So we spaced Annie and Samuel. There's 6 years in between there. It was good for us, not good for them. It's now that they're grown, they're becoming friends. But as kids, Annie was outgrowing something and Samuel was coming into the same thing. So that 6 years span between them, they could never use the same toys. They could never watch the same TV show. They could never speak the same language. Until now, when Samuel turned 19. But before that, all we had was fights. And I look at them. At some point, I realized, oh my God, I wish people knew that spacing kids is good, but I think kids need to grow up together as friends. And they can never be friends if one is 6 and the other one is crowing. I think that's a mistake I regret. But now they are grown, I regret less.
Great. Now coming back to discipleship, you're training the next generation. But in this time and this age, there is a huge challenge where discipleship has taken advantage of the technology and social media access that is there. But that comes with a few challenges, such as people disconnecting or not viewing the importance of in-person discipleship growing, having somebody to walk with you, like in the times of Jesus, like in your time. But now there are people who have teachers, pastors online on YouTube. They don't go to local churches, or when they go to local churches, they don't feel like they belong. They belong more to the online church more than the local church. When you see all those challenges that come to the church, how do you see them affecting discipleship? And what would you say to the people who no longer feel the interest of being part of a local church?
That's a very big challenge. And I don't think the young generation sees it that way. But I'm old school. I believe that discipleship is not just a set of teachings that you sit on a television or a computer and listen to some guy instructing you how to bear the fruit of the Spirit, how to love your neighbor. I think for me, discipleship, the Jesus model, because there are so many kind of discipleship. Disciples, John, the Baptist had disciples, and then they talk about the disciples of the Pharisees, the disciples so and so. So there are many types of disciples, but the Jesus kind is different, and the Jesus kind is not just a class of instructions or a set of rules. It's a life that's shared. If you go back in your the 4 Gospels, you realize that Jesus uses about 4 levels of discipling the 12. The first, he said, "Come and see," and they came in John 1, and they stayed with him the whole day, and then they went home, and then a few months down the road, he goes to their workplace, which was the lake, fishing, and said, "Follow me." And the Bible clearly says they left their nets and their boats and the catch of fish they had, and they followed him. What people don't realize that from that day, they never went back home. So they went where he went. And then there was another level. I think that's where he says, "Stay in me." And so everywhere he slept, they slept. Everywhere he went, they went. And so every level he was releasing something to them. They learned by watching. Jesus did not just only teach with his mouth. He let the disciples watch him do miracles. They watched him uh, touch the sick and do things. So the presence, the physical presence in the discipleship, I think for me matters more, because discipleship is not just instructing someone to do something you want them to do. Is you sharing a life with them and letting part of you be shared by them. And so you discipleship is well, the definition we usually use to define what's the discipleship. Discipleship is actually sharing your life. The people that I look at as my disciples in the last 20 years are people that have lived in my house, that I had to share a dining table with them. And I had to, a lot of them, put them in my car and drive them with me to go do conferences, do crusades, visit the sick, do different things together. And you can tell among my disciples who was close to me and who learned from a distance, because those that walked with me in the physical, they actually do things, they replicate, they exactly do the thing that I used to do. And I look at them and I see myself. So for me, that's what discipleship is. But then there is this blessing of technology. What do you do with technology? It's still hard for me to disciple anyone on YouTube or anyone, but I think it's a beginning. If you can, if you that's all you have, would be a good thing. I mean, you think of places like China or Saudi Arabia or North Korea, where you can't go physical. If they have an opportunity to watch you teach on discipleship, I mean, that's the only option. But I still say, if there is an option of presence, I'll never attend the online church if I had an opportunity to drive to the church. That for me is online is the last resort. It's like I can't. I totally can't. So
What would be your message to those people who have wanted or tried to lay their lives down to their leaders so they can be discipled and grow, but instead what they got was brokenness? They were hurt, they were disappointed, they were mishandled or abused, and now they say we can never go back to church. All pastors are liars. We can never lay our lives to anybody, give our lives to anybody.
yeah, that's a hard one. It's I think the Bible says it's easier to win a city than win an offended brother or sister, and so offense can go deeper. But yeah, I think that's one of the deceits of the enemy in our time is that offense is very, very common, and Jesus said it will not stop. He said, "Hey, offense is here, will always come." And so the enemy has gotten people on the wrong side of offense. And once people are offended in our generation, in this modern time, they just move on. Because there are so many avenues of trying to replicate the same. You go on social media, so avoiding people is easier in this generation. But it doesn't change the fact that also Jesus said, hey, you need to forgive. And one of the mistakes I encourage people, especially those that have been to churches and have been abused by those in power, it doesn't mean that everyone is like that. You still need to depend on the Spirit of the Lord for leadership. And so you don't go to a person and cease to look at Jesus. So that's I think that's the biggest mistake people. No, I don't know about Canada, but in Uganda, you have this generation of young people who believe that the church leader, the pastor, is everything. And I think the pastor, the apostle, church leaders, I think that those titles are overrated for me. It's like Jesus is still Lord. I have a pastor, but he's also a believer. He may be my pastor, but he's also a son of God, just like I am. So if he does something wrong that offends me, I should be able to look at him with grace and know that he's just another human like me that deserves grace. So offense that that leads you to a place where you judge every man in the same basket and say all leaders are the same. You've taken your eyes off the Lord and you are looking at man in the place of God. So that's one of the things I would say, is that I don't care what happened to you. Number one, I think you need to forgive whoever offended you, especially those leaders. I've had worse cases in Uganda, sexual abuse. People have taken church leaders have taken people's monies and property. People have lost properties and families and marriages through the deceit of some weird pastors and people that God never called. And my advice to people that have suffered those kind of offenses and abuse, that you need to forgive and realize that Jesus saw about those people and he needs you to forgive. But it doesn't mean that every one of those church leaders are the same. People are different. I know I've met men of God like you. I mean, I know Pastor Mayanja, I know Pastor Tria. I know a lot of pastors. They are just normal people. They are men of God, they are servants of God, but they are normal people. And so I think number one, the cause of those abuses in our Christian circles can be people cease to look at God and put their eyes on people. And that's what Paul says. He says to, I think it says to the Colossians, chapter 2, he says, fixing your eyes in Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. If every Christian learns how to fix their eyes on Jesus and stay there, and then use the same lens that see Jesus will see other men, you know that the pastor is just an under shepherd that God gave you to lead you to a certain way. But no pastor can lead you to the fullness of Christ. We all need to come to the cross. And the ground at the cross, I tell people that the ground at the cross is leveled. No one is saying, hey, I have a pulpit, a platform at the cross. It's leveled. Doesn't matter if you're a pastor, if you are a pope, if you are an archbishop, whatever you are, the ground at the cross is leveled. And everyone should see Jesus the same way. And for me, I think that's one of the life practices in my life, that Jesus always number one. And when I see him, I see even the most powerful men of God as objects of grace. You see, anytime they can do something weird, and whatever they do should not affect my faith, because my faith is not in men. My faith is in God. If you take your eyes off God and you look at man, you are troubled. Cursed is the man who trusts in another man, the Bible says.
Any last message to those who are watching? It could be to people who have received Christ and now they're not in good terms with their families, like once you were not in good terms with your family, that you had to even leave and leave the church. It could also be people who have been offended, like we said in the church. We already told them to forgive and focus on Jesus. But it could also be people who have not been walking well with our Lord. What would be a message that you could give to all who are watching right now?
Yeah, I would say to everyone that the year 2026 should be different. We are coming into the end times, when the Bible says the appearance of the Lord is sooner than we know. We are closer to his return than when we first began. And the days are not going to be easy, not only here in Africa, but all over the world. And the enemy, the Bible says, knows that his time is short. So he's working day and night to steal your faith, to steal your focus, to confuse you, to deceive you, and keep you in a circle of something. And so the thing that you really, every Christian should be looking out to, is that you need to raise your eyes and know that we are looking at the end times, and Jesus comes anytime. And he says no one knows the time or the day. And that should be in our face every day, that anytime Jesus appears, because the signs of the end times are here with us, so that helps you to walk a daily walk with God, without trespassing your life, or without wasting your life. So every minute, every day should be a day you live in the presence of God. It means you pray, you read your Bible, you fellowship, because fellowship is a must for those who love the Lord. Fellowship is not just going and meeting your fellow brothers and sisters. Fellowship is inserting your piece of the puzzle into the bigger puzzle, and becoming part of a functional church, and say, hey, here is where I serve, here is where I add value to the body of Christ. Instead of isolating yourself, we all been offended in a way. Jesus was offended. I haven't met anyone who has never been offended. My pastors offended me, but the love is bigger and deeper than any offense. And love leads you to forgiveness. So I would say to the people that have been offended by church or by family, that there's only one life you can live. If you spend all your life trying to make yourself right, the people that offend us, they don't know they offended us. They continue living their lives as if it's normal. It's the offended that suffers, and then you start walking in forgiveness. So my message to them is that you need to set yourself free by forgiving. Forgiveness is the power that we hold. You forgive them. You don't have to let them know what they did. You don't need to ask. They don't need to come and ask for forgiveness. Forgiveness is, you are sitting in a prison, and you locked yourself in that prison, and there is a key by your feet. So pick up the keys, unlock the door of the prison, and go out. Don't let other people's opinions and whatever they say and do decide your happiness or freedom. This is for freedom that Christ has set us free. And so for families, I think you need just to forgive. And I don't mean that if you go forgive, you reconcile. You may need to stay away until you are in a place of authority where you are able to speak back. But until then, you just forgive, and reconciliation will come later. But you need to forgive. So people confuse forgiveness and reconciliation. I think forgiveness is different, reconciliation is different. You don't have to reconcile with someone you are forgiving. It can come later, but you can forgive. And for the people that have walked away from the Lord, are not serious with their salvation, man, my brothers and sisters, you really need to be serious with God. We need to know that this relationship with Jesus is real. We are not talking about religion, we are talking about a relationship between someone who loves you that deep and someone you need to receive his love. That's what the Bible says, that in Jeremiah 33 and verse 3, that I have loved you with an everlasting love. So you need to respond to the love of God. He loves you more than you ever know. He loves you more than anyone can ever love you. And for you to walk away from the love of God, where do you go? So that's my encouragement to everyone.
Thank you so much, Pastor Robert, for sparing this time to be with us. I wish you a joyful rest of the year, and I encourage everyone who has made it to this end to go ahead and share this message to others. Anybody that you think this message would help and encourage. May God bless you, and see you next time.